The wind has a sound in the high Apennines. It is not a whisper, it is a wet, heavy roar that scrapes ice and shale from the ridges. It is February 1944, and the Italian winter is not a season, it is an adversary. On a narrow track, barely 18 inches wide, a column of mules from the 605th Field Artillery Battalion moves in the half-light of dawn. This is not combat. This is the routine. This is the grinding, metabolic work of war. Each animal steams, its breath pluming white against the grey rock. The path is slick with frozen mud. Thousands of feet below, the Rapido River Valley is a ribbon of fog. The men here are not frontline infantry. They are packers, mule skinners, men who understand the complex language of harnesses, hoof picks, and stubbornness. Sergeant Elias Thorne, 38 years old and already ancient in this company of boys, runs a raw hand along the back of his lead mule, a grey animal named Daisy. He checks her load, not a howitzer piece, just 80-pound ammunition cans. The air smells of wet wool, cold iron, and the sharp ammonia of animal sweat. Far to the south, the rumble of heavy artillery echoes off the peaks. It is just noise, as familiar and ignorable as the wind. Thorne's world is this single file line. His focus is the next 100 yards of treacherous trail. A young corporal, new to the pack train, eyes the knot Thorne is using on Daisy's lead. It looks different. It looks loose, almost careless. He decides not to ask. It is just Thorne's way. This is their normal, a vertical, freezing, and exhausting existence, moving the material of war at the pace of a steady walk. The disruption arrives not as a shell, but as a piece of paper. A field order typed on flimsy carbon lands on the desk of Captain Hayes, the battery commander. The command post is a captured stone farmhouse, its windows covered in canvas. Hayes reads the memo from 5th Army Headquarters. The 86th Infantry Regiment is pinned down. They have tried for 3 weeks to take the summit of Monte Belvedere, a 3,000-foot fortress of German engineering. The tankers of the 761st, attached to the division, reported their Shermans could not even reach the valley road without bogging down in the mud. They are now just artillery targets. The memo is blunt. Division Command wants 2 full batteries of 75mm pack howitzers on the summit, operational by 0600 in 36 hours. Hayes laughs, a short, sharp bark that cuts through the tense cold air. "It's a suicide order," he says to his lieutenant. "It's not a trail up there. It's a rock climb. A man can barely do it with a rifle, let alone a 200-pound gun tube." Sergeant Thorne stands by the flap, having delivered a supply report. He listens, his face impassive. He looks past the captain, through the open tent flap, at the sheer, ice-covered face of Monte Belvedere. It dominates the sky, a wall of grey rock and dark pines, vanishing into the low clouds. The Germans dug in elements of the 1st Fallschirmjäger, the best troops Hitler has, are up there watching everything. The mystery is one of pure physics. How do you move 8 tons of precision steel up a cliff in the dark under enemy observation? Hayes tosses the order onto a pile of maps. It's impossible. We'll lose every gun and half the animals. Thorne says nothing. He just pulls his collar tighter. What he didn't know was that his quiet, stubborn understanding of animals was about to defy the physics of an entire campaign. The problem is the Gothic line. It is not a line of trenches, but a strategic defense system leveraging the most brutal terrain in Europe. The U.S. Army is facing a tactical nightmare. Field reports from the War Office are bleak. The M1A1 75mm pack howitzer is a marvel of American engineering, designed specifically for this. At 339 pounds, it can be broken down into 9 mule loads. But broken down is a deceptively simple term. The heaviest pieces remain dense, awkward and unforgiving. The breech, 207 pounds. The tube, 198 pounds. These are not sacks of grain. They are solid, polished steel, and they do not balance easily. The standard issue rigging is the M4 Phillips pack saddle, a rigid, complex assembly of wood and leather designed by ordnance experts at the Rock Island Arsenal. Its purpose is total load security. This manual-driven precision is the enemy. The Quartermaster Corps Doctrine, FM 25-5, Pack Transportation, details the intricate hitches required, the double diamond, the box hitch. Each is designed to ensure the load and the animal are one single secure unit. This doctrine assumes a trail. It assumes the animal may stumble, but the priority is always to save the cargo. On the Apennine ridges, this doctrine is a death sentence. The trails are narrow, angled, and slick with ice. When a 200-pound mule, burdened with a 200-pound top-heavy load, slips, its center of gravity is fatally compromised. The secure hitch does its job perfectly. It ensures that as the 200-pound barrel tips over the edge, it takes the 200-pound mule, the $15,000 saddle, and the lead packer with it. The physics of the situation are cold. After Action Report, 3rd Algerian Infantry Division, Monte Cassino. Losses of pack animals due to falls on mountain trails exceed 40%. Artillery pieces lost in this manner are non-recoverable. Wise, an irrecoverable load is a statistic in a report. On the mountain, it is a human catastrophe. It means an 8-man gun crew who have spent 6 hours hauling their own 50-pound base plates and ammo belts up the same ridge, arrive at their firing position with nothing to fire. They are infantry, freezing in snow-filled foxholes, waiting for support that will never come. The consequence is paid in blood by the 86th Regiment. A private in dog company, shivering with dysentery, stares down at the valley where the American tanks sit, useless as toys. The cold is a physical weight. 15 no circ text, Sekufat 9 circutext sealen, with a wind that cuts through wool and canvas. Morale is not low, it is gone. It has been replaced by a numb, exhausted acceptance of a vertical hell. A diary entry from a medic in the 86th reads, January 14th, 1945, tried to get the plasma up to Baker Company, lost the mule and the corpsman. They just vanished, slipped on the ice. I didn't even hear them land. We can't fight the mountain and the Krauts at the same time. The mountain is winning. The officers at the divisional command post are not fools. They are engineers and artillerymen, graduates of West Point. They look at the contour maps, at the 50 and 60-degree inclines. They read the meteorological reports. They know the math. They write memos confirming the obvious. The experts agreed it couldn't be done. We think of war as machines, as tanks and planes. But sometimes the difference between victory and defeat is as old as the mountains themselves. If you find value in these hidden stories of ingenuity, please consider supporting our channel so we can continue to bring them to light. Sergeant Elias Thorne is not a product of West Point. He's not even a product of the 10th Mountain Division, with its roster of university skiers and mountaineers. He's a 38-year-old ranch hand from Bishop, California, drafted into the Quartermaster Corps and shunted to the 605th simply because his enlistment form said he spoke Mule. His world is the eastern Sierras, a landscape of high deserts and granite peaks that makes Italy look tame. He spent 15 years not as a soldier, but as a packer for the U.S. Forest Service and the Southern California Edison Company, hauling transformers and cable into roadless wilderness. He learned his trade not from an army manual, but from old Basque shepherds and miners who had been doing it since the 1880s. His personality is one of abrasive patience. He trusts the animal, not the equipment. He views the Army's rigid M4 saddle and its prescribed hitches with quiet contempt. He sees them as devices designed by engineers who love equipment more than they understand animals. His formative context is the mule itself. He knows a mule is not a machine. It is a highly intelligent, self-preservationist animal. It knows its own balance better than any man. It will fight a secure load that feels wrong, a load that doesn't move with its body. The Army method lashes the steel to the animal, forcing it to compensate. Thorne's Sierra method was different. The load had to ride loose, moving with the mule's gait, a partnership, not a subjugation. This philosophy, born in the peaceful American West, is about to collide with the rigid, desperate doctrine of the European theater. The idea comes not in a flash, but in a slow, cold burn. Thorne stands in the picket line, brushing ice from Daisy's back. He is thinking about the medic's lost plasma. He's thinking about the physics. The man died because he was tied to the load. The mule died because it was tied to the load. His realization is a betrayal of his entire job description. What if the load isn't the priority? What if the mule is? He walks from the picket line to the command post. The farmhouse is thick with smoke and the metallic smell of the radio. Captain Hayes is staring at the map, his face grey with fatigue. "Captain," Thorne says, his voice flat. He doesn't salute. "I can get the guns up there." Hayes looks up, his eyes bloodshot. "How, Sergeant? You going to sprout wings on 'em?" Thorne shakes his head. "No, sir. We're tying them wrong. The manual is killing the animals. We need to tie the load so it can be dumped fast." A young lieutenant in the corner, fresh from Fort Sill, actually laughs. "Dumped? Sergeant, that's a $50,000 howitzer, not a sack of potatoes. The entire point of a pack hitch is to secure the load." Thorne doesn't look at the lieutenant. He looks at Hayes. "Sir, it's better to lose the gun tube down a cliff and keep the mule than to lose the mule and the tube. We can go back for a piece of steel. We can't replace a trained animal in 36 hours, and we can't replace the packer leading it." Hayes is incredulous. "You are suggesting I authorize you to intentionally violate quartermaster regulations? To tie a breakaway hitch on a piece of divisional artillery?" Thorne nods. "Yes, sir." Hayes looks at the map, at the red circles denoting the 86th's stalled position. He is a desperate man. "Get your crew, Thorne. One gun, one. You lose that piece. You're walking back to Naples, personally." The preparation is not a grand military operation. It is a conspiracy conducted in a rocky defile hidden from German observers just after dusk. The air is electric, and not just from the static on the radio. Thorne has his team, 6 packers, all Mustangers from Wyoming or Tennessee, men who, like him, trusted muscle and instinct over regulations. His new and most crucial ally is a 20-year-old ordnance corporal named Perea. Perea is technically responsible for the guns. He is supposed to prevent this. "Sergeant," Perea whispers, his voice trembling, "if the colonel sees this knot It's a court-martial for both of us. Thorn is already working. He has discarded the standard 1-2-inch manila rope. He's using lighter 1-4-inch cord for the final ties. He and his team are rigging the 198-pound tube onto Daisy. He shows them the trick. It is not a knot in any manual. It is a modification of a simple packer's hitch, but with one single, intentional, weak point. A loop held in place by a single strand of thinner cord run through a quick-release ring. He calls it the panic knot. The mule stumbles, Thorn explains, his voice a low rumble, his breath fogging. She goes left, the load shifts right. This thin cord, he taps it, takes the full 200-pound shock load. It's designed to snap. To demonstrate, he pulls hard on a separate lead rope. The knot unravels instantly. The entire 200-pound steel cradle drops cleanly, landing with a soft thud on a pile of pine boughs. Daisy just shudders, regaining her footing, unharmed. The men are silent. Perea stares at the knot, then at Thorn. It's genius, Sarge, and it's also the end of your career. Thorn just begins cinching the load back up. Let's test it on the trail. We leave in 10. The trail is a goat path. It is 200. There is no moon. The only light is the flat, reflective white of the snow. The wind is a high-pitched scream that masks the clink of harness. Thorn leads Daisy himself. The rest of the gun's 9 loads follow. They reach the first impossible section, a 30-foot switchback of sheer ice-covered rock, a place where the path is less than a foot wide. Daisy places a hoof, and it slips. The mule lurches violently, her body slamming against the rock wall. The 198-pound steel tube, lashed to her back, shifts hard to the right, swinging out over the 2,000-foot drop. The animal grunts, a sound of pure terror, fighting for balance. In a standard hitch, her own momentum, combined with the secure load, would have pulled her over. Thorn, holding the panic line, doesn't hesitate. He yanks it. The crack of the thin rope snapping is lost in the wind. The 198-pound gun barrel drops. It doesn't fall into the abyss. It slides 5 feet down the icy rock and wedges into a crevice. Daisy, suddenly lightened by a quarter of her load, scrambles back onto the path, snorting and trembling, but safe. The men behind him gasp. It worked. They stare at the barrel, lodged in the rock, then at the living mule. It takes them 20 minutes, using climbing ropes, to retrieve the barrel, but they do. They retrieve it. They didn't lose the animal. They didn't lose the gun. They re-rig it and continue. They reach the rendezvous point, 2,000 feet up, 30 minutes ahead of schedule. Captain Hayes is there, his binoculars fogged. He just looks at the intact gun piece, then at the mule still breathing. He says nothing. He just nods and keys his radio mic. Send the rest of the battery. Use Thorn's method. If stories like this, where old-world knowledge meets modern crisis, fascinate you, stay with us. The next chapter of wartime innovation, born from this simple idea, might surprise you. The confrontation comes 2 weeks later. Monte Belvedere is taken. The cost was brutal, but the artillery support from the summit was the decisive factor. Now the auditors have arrived. The setting is the same drafty stone farmhouse, but the atmosphere is not one of operational tension. It is one of bureaucratic judgment. A colonel from the Quartermaster Corps, his uniform clean, has come up from the rear echelon in Naples. He holds a field report. Sergeant Elias Thorn, the colonel says, his voice flat. This report, filed by Captain Hayes, states you ordered the intentional compromise of the M4 Phillips pack saddle rigging on 12 units of M1A1 artillery. Thorn stands at a relaxed parade rest. "Sir, I ordered a field modification to save the animals and the equipment." The colonel is not impressed. "Your modification resulted in the loss of 2 gun tubes and 1 breech assembly for a period of 72 hours. They had to be retrieved by engineer climbing teams. That is an unacceptable loss of combat critical material in an active zone." Captain Hayes steps forward. "Colonel, with all respect, Sergeant Thorn's method is the only reason we have any guns on that ridge. The manual's method, which we tried first, resulted in the 100% loss of 2 animals and their loads. Irrecoverable. Thorn's method got 10 guns up in 1 night. The colonel turns to Hayes. "The manual is designed to protect government property, Captain. Your job is to follow it." Thorn speaks, his voice quiet but carrying across the room. "Sir, property doesn't care if it falls. A mule does, and a mule will fight you to stay alive. The manual fights the mule. I let the mule win, so we could win." There is a long, heavy silence. The colonel stares at the mud-caked sergeant. He sees a man who does not respect regulations. Thorn sees a man who does not respect mules. The colonel slowly closes his notebook. "Your methods are unorthodox, Sergeant, reckless, but the results, as confirmed by the 86th Regimental Commander, are undeniable. Carry on. The real test is not the review. The real test is the summit. The scene transitions. We are on the peak of Monte Belvedere. It is 0500. It is not a test. It is the assault. 12 75mm howitzers are assembled in the dark, their crews knee-deep in snow, their hands raw and bleeding from handling the frozen steel. The infantry of the 86th are 500 yards ahead, hunkered down in frozen shell scrapes. The Germans, in their deep stone bunkers and machine gun nests, have no idea that artillery is sitting on their doorstep. They believe this ridge is unassailable by anything heavier than a man. At 600, as the sky turns a sick grey, the German counterattack begins. It is their standard doctrine, a massive barrage of Nebelwerfer mortars, followed by elite infantry. The American forward observers, shivering in a hole, scream into the radio. "Fire mission! Grid 304, assembly area! Danger close!" The command is given. "Fire!" The sound is not the distant, reassuring boom of valley artillery. It is a sharp, deafening, violent crack from right behind them. 12 guns fire as one. The shells travel less than 1 meters. The German assembly area, a fortified stone farmhouse, simply vanishes in a cloud of rock and red mist. The shockwave hits the American infantrymen in the back. The Germans are in total, abject confusion. Their assault falters. They are being shelled from the clouds. For 6 hours, Thorn's guns, supplied by mules using his panic hitch, break every counterattack. A captured German major's report later, "It was not possible. The Americans had brought artillery where no machine could go. We were fighting ghosts." The 86th Regiment takes the objective, and the Gothic line is broken in this sector. The official recognition is a single line in Captain Hayes's report, praising the 605th for ingenuity under fire. The Thorn panic hitch never became official doctrine. It does not appear in a revised FM 25.5. It was a field expedient, a trick born of desperation and an intimate knowledge of animals. It was an unwritten, unapproved, and wildly successful solution. But it spread. The packers of the 10th Mountain taught it to other units. The core concept, prioritizing the motive power, the mule over the cargo, the gun, was a quiet revolution. It was a shift from ordnance first to logistics first thinking. This principle, born on an icy Italian cliff, found its way into other theaters. In the dense, muddy, vertical jungles of Burma, British Chindits used a similar breakaway rigging for their supplies. The U.S. Marine Corps, facing the impossible volcanic ridges of Iwo Jima and the sheer, muddy escarpments of Okinawa, adopted their own modified versions for hauling 55-gallon drums of water and crates of plasma. The Battle of Monte Belvedere proved that 19th-century logistics, when intelligently applied, could defeat 20th-century fortifications. The M1A1 pack howitzer was the star, but it was useless without the mules. After the war, Sergeant Elias Thorne was honorably discharged. He was awarded a Bronze Star, not for his hitch, but for meritorious service in support of combat operations. He returned to Bishop, California, and went back to the Forest Service. He never spoke of his invention. To him, it was just common sense. He died in 1972, and his contribution remained what it always was. An unwritten secret passed from one old packer to the next. Today, warfare is dominated by drones, satellite logistics, and hypersonic weapons. We move terabytes of data in an instant. But the fundamental problem of war and of humanity remains: how to get the thing to the place when the terrain itself is the enemy. We see this not just in war, but in disaster response. When an earthquake flattens a village in the Himalayas, or a wildfire cuts off a mountain town, the first vehicles to get through are not trucks. They are mules, donkeys, and men on foot. The Thorne principle, that the method must respect the medium, is timeless. NASA engineers designing a rover for the broken terrain of Mars face the same dilemma. Do you build it to be indestructible, or do you build it to fail gracefully, to sacrifice a part to save the mission? The most brilliant solutions are often not about more power, but about a more clever, more humble understanding of the obstacle. The impossible is often just a failure of imagination, a rigid adherence to a manual that no longer applies. Elias Thorne's genius wasn't in inventing a new machine. It was in respecting an old animal. The wind still howls through the passes of the Apennines. The stone bunkers of the Gothic line are still there, slowly surrendering to the earth, silent witnesses to the battle fought in the clouds. They stand as a memorial, not to the power of the cannons, but to the stubborn, simple courage of the mules that carried them. Every great idea begins as an act of defiance against impossibility. What impossible ideas do you think could change the world?